Every company has a culture. The best ones, the great ones, design theirs on purpose.
Almost 50% of new hires quit in their first 18 months, or they get fired. They leave in some form. We kind of have defaulted to a common-sized, one-sided view, which is the company is right, their view of culture is correct, and employees have to choose whether or not they're going to chameleon themselves to it or not. People need to realize that culture is not a t-shirt. Culture is an amalgamate of processes and systems and approaches. So we got to dive into really, okay, so what does that mean? What are those systems? Why should I care about that?
Hello again. Today's guest is Matthew Person, organizational strategist and the author of the upcoming book, The Culture of Alignment. So we're going to unpack why most team cultures are quietly breaking down and how his new concept of constrained independence offers a new path to high trust, high performance, and scalable clarity. That was a mouthful, but I'm pumped about this topic.
Well,
How are you?
I'm great, and I'm glad to be here and excited to talk about it. I think hopefully an interesting perspective that might change some views.
And tell us a little bit about why this topic interested you enough to write a book.
Well, I got pushed into it. It wasn't something that happened naturally. I didn't sit down one day and go, I'm going to write a book about this topic. Years ago, I was asked a question in an interview. This is like 8 years ago. And they said, how would you maintain culture across 500-600 employees in 4 offices in 3 states? And my answer became the framework that became this book and this concept, the Square Management System. It happened because the recruiter said, I don't think I've ever heard anyone answer the question that way. You should do something with that. It's pretty interesting. And that kind of stuck in the back of my head because people don't normally say those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And really the answer, which I'll dive more into, was how I approached managing people, places, and things from my start in my career in the sports industry. And it was just built on necessity and what I felt made sense. And then since then, it took some time. I developed it, I worked on it, and I also switched careers. And I went from the sports industry and executive management into M&A and banking and buy-side M&A. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to companies, and kind of started to see how my framework made a lot of sense. And where people maybe have naturally defaulted to actually deploying components of it, and then where people really had problems that could have been fixed with the system. And over the time, I would talk to people about it and say, this is something I've been thinking about. What do you think? And had people push me. And I think that's the nicest thing about this, is that it was kind of this organic development. I'm not a natural writer. I spent the first draft compared to where it is now. It's amazing how far it's come. And I've leveraged a lot of great people. I went to publishers. You suffer from imposter syndrome to a degree. Mm-hmm. So I went to publishers, I went to friends, I went to old executives and talked to them. And over the years, 8 years, it's finally, and I think in a really good form.
Has a lot changed in the 8 years that you were writing this? Because I guess COVID was smack dab in the middle when this remote work trend came about.
I think it validated it.
It validated it? Okay.
It validated it, and it made the process of writing anything, right? It makes you actually figure out if it makes sense or not, and help give it structure. And then over time, things like COVID and the hybrid and where you work and how do you work with people who are remote or in the office, and what matters, and do we return to work or not? And then myself being in different roles with different companies who had varying degrees of success, I started seeing the method come to life and have more applicability. And it gave me confidence to go and finish it. And I finally just took the plunge recently and said, I'm going to stop talking about it, and I'm just going to go do it. But I needed the time, if that makes sense. I needed the time to get it from ideation and a PowerPoint that I made with a friend 8 years ago to a book. It took time.
Mm-hmm. I was just talking with someone today who's a publisher, and she said a lot of the folks that are writing books that are experts in things, writing a book isn't something that they can do quickly because they're in doing business. Like, they're running businesses. They're doing the thing that they would write about. So it is a challenge to get out there and write your own book if you're in the weeds doing the thing that you're going to write about.
It is. It's also helpful because it gave me anecdotes. And, it also helped me frame some of the concepts. And I was like, hey, you know what? I need to change this a little bit. I need to tweak this a little bit. This isn't quite, I thought this was right, but it's not. I need to actually change this. And then I'd also give it people to read. I'm like, what do you think? And they would get confused here or didn't understand that. I'm like, all right, I got to change this. Not being a natural writer and also intending not to make it a full book. I call it a pocket guide. And I joke about that. It even says it on the cover. It's because it's meant to be actual. I don't want you to read this. And we'll get into a little bit about why the way I approach the book is actually how I think what happened to culture. I don't want you to copy this. And then that's the point. Most business books annoy me in some fashion because what they've done is said, I talked to 500 CEOs. I surveyed 1,000 public companies and I took the aggregate and here are the 6 or 7 things you need to know. And it's like, okay, that's helpful, right? It's always good to know what good looks like, but that has no applicability to you or your circumstance. And so I can throw as much data as I want at you, but it doesn't really mean anything because it's not applicable to you. And so the whole point of this system of the book is to impress upon people that it's intentional. Right? You intentionally decide to do this and you intentionally design it for your parameters. Your company, it's your company, it's your systems, it's your processes, it's your output. Your culture is your own. It should not be copied. You should not look at someone else and copy it, nor should I copy a book. And so I didn't want to bore people with verbiage. I wanted people to action against it.
That's great. Let's go to the root that started it all. How did you answer that question?
I answered that question by simply saying I would give employees a box to bounce around in. And that became the square management system. So what does that mean? What is the box and why is that important? When you look at culture and corporate culture specifically, when you go back to this, copying, we kind of have defaulted to a common sized one-sided view, which is the company is right. Their view of culture is correct. And employees have to choose whether or not, they're going to chameleon themselves to it or not. The problem is that companies that are doing this are just copying like the best place to work. We have gone to this broad perspective of culture because we don't want to upset anybody. And so culture has defaulted to, hey, you're a best place to work. What are your attributes? Just like business books. What are the attributes across these companies? Oh, this company is the best place to work. What did they do to affect that outcome? And then we copy those attributes. And that may not work for your circumstance. It may not even be what you want to do, but that's what we're doing effectively. And I don't put a lot of data in things, but if the one data point I would give to everybody is this, there is a failure associated with this approach, but it doesn't sound like that would be the case. And here's why. I'm sure that when you went to a job interview, Chelsey, the hiring manager was like, this is the best culture I've ever been at. We have a great culture. Has any listener actually interviewed for a job where they were like, the culture is terrible here. You're going to be lucky if you survive a year? No, right? That doesn't happen. Correspondingly, employees don't go to work their first day disgruntled. You're not showing up for that job going, oh, shucks, I can't believe I work here. That doesn't happen. Everyone comes in and they're beyond excited. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to prove to everyone I'm the best, insert, job title, whatever. So you have two sides, what it takes to have a relationship, which is the company and the individual. And both people on day one are the best culture, best employee for that job. And the data point is, though, that almost 50% of new hires quit in their first 18 months or they get fired. They leave in some form.
What?
Yeah.
Huh.
So
it's expensive.
It's very expensive, right? Everyone knows that you're spot on. It's expensive. It's costly and it's a scarlet letter the employee has to wear. Like, wait a second, you've only been in all the recruiters you talk to, you've only been at this company for a year. What happened? You must be a really tough employee. Well, maybe not, right? It's a two-way street. And so obviously this system of copying, this designation of a best place to work, these common sized attributes that we just throw out and say, hey, you should do this. It doesn't work. And that was eye-opening for me when I started looking at the book. It was like, what does good culture look like? And I saw that statistic and I'm like, there's a clear need here for both individual employees, because it's a two-way relationship, and companies to really just do better at understanding who they are and how they operate. Because that's really the problem, is we've gone a little bit of astray as to what good culture means and what it looks like and how to apply that from an organizational design perspective.
You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly from the M&A experience. Why is culture important?
Well, I have a multivariate background. So you're right. I was in the M&A. I've been in M&A for both sides as a seller of businesses and a buyer for over a decade. I also have a decade plus of just executive management and operations experience building companies too. So I have had to affect culture as well. Culture is important because it is the mechanism by which you can rapidly scale a business. And so it rightly so gets the attention that it deserves. If you have, just like to go to sports analogy, as I started my executive management career in sports, if you have one member of a team in a clubhouse that's a cancer, they call it the clubhouse cancer, that person can affect the culture of the entire organization and really cause a downfall. You need everyone swimming in the same lane. And when that happens, it's something special in a company. That's why the box analogy, I think, makes so much sense. Like you could think of it this way. When everyone is in the box, and we'll get into what that means, but when everyone's in the box, you are able to, well, let's talk about why their box is constrained first. So culture is, a lot of people say, this amorphous way of doing, right? And I also said, I think we could probably do a little bit better than that. We could probably define it. And if you, Chelsey, went to a job and you had just no constraint, right? You were just free to do whatever you wanted. Your degree of employee independence was just infinity. Well, that would create chaos. And companies, in order to actually work, they have to have standards, they have to have guidelines. Some industries, like doctors, hospitals, you can't really have a whole lot of deviation there. Someone dies, right? So constrained independence is effectively culture, which is the degree to which employees can action their own independent ideas. And how do you then create that box? How do you create that culture? That degree of independence is the square that everyone bounces around in. And when an employee's ways of doing, their beliefs, their values, everything that they do matches to a degree in the box, the company's ways of doing and beliefs and operating metrics and all this kind of stuff, then you have really good culture. You have alignment between the employee and the company. And when you're outside the box, I mean, people, I'm sure listeners have been outside the box in a company before. It's tough. You get it. You're like, I don't fit. And that doesn't make you a bad employee. It doesn't make the company bad, but you are not aligned. The problem is most companies don't have a box. They don't know what it is. They haven't intentionally designed it. What are we doing? We're copying. We're copying someone else's box or copying pieces of the box, not even the whole thing. And we're saying, here's our culture. And we're not really understanding all the component parts that make up a well-run, well-organized business. And we're then telling someone who doesn't kind of match to that binary, you're a good or a bad employee. So that's what's gone wrong, in my view, in culture, is we really don't understand what culture is and the output is. And it's now, to go back to your earlier question, all those 8 years between when the concept came into my head and finishing the design was seeing it actually happen. Mm-hmm. Seeing bad culture and good culture.
Do you think that this copy paste, like leaders are, air quoting for those who are listening, are putting attention on culture? So they've got a page on their website. They might even have, I've been the leader of a culture committee at a company, and, where everybody can say what they want and have ideas, that those are the types of things. We're doing the actions and we have a page with our mission statement on it. And when someone signs, I'm talking a lot here, but do you think that we're, air quoting again, just kind of doing culture, but it's not meaningful because we didn't design it ourselves as a company?
Well, I think it's all fluff. It's misguided effort at culture. And yeah, you're right. I think people throw things out there to say, we did it. And for executives, and having been one, there are times in which you want to tell your boss, the board, the public, if you're a public company, yeah, we did this. I checked the box. No, we have culture here. We have a mission statement and we have these committees and all that kind of stuff. And you have so much going on that you're not really paying attention to it. You're just pacifying the request. And so what's the easiest thing to do? To go back to, no one says that you've made a bad decision if you buy Salesforce, right? Because it's just so big. It's like, oh yeah, I understand it's Salesforce. Why? That's not a bad choice. Where if you went with vendor B or C, maybe better, maybe more affordable. But if one thing goes awry, you're like, hey, this wouldn't have happened if you bought Salesforce. The same thing with culture. Like, oh no, like we have all these attributes and look at all I'm doing. I'm checking, we have a ping pong table and we have happy hour Thursdays. And then people can sit there and be like, oh yeah, that checks the box. The problem is that those are component parts of culture. It's not a holistic system. It's not a whole intentionally designed system. And as a result, you end up with incomplete, picture of what culture is.
Instead of copy pasting, who sets what the actual culture of a company is? Who sets this box?
It's a great question. The box is set by the executive staff. And it depends to a degree on what type of company you are. If you're a founder and you're in a startup, sometimes that can be one person. I would suggest if you're a founder, you probably want to include your first couple hires on your senior team to help them, build what this company should look like. So to me, the right answer, and I hate to say that because the whole book is about there is no right answer, but the answer should be that it's executive. Ultimately, the box is an amalgamate of systems and processes and procedures. And all of those things in variant form affect the culture of the business, that ways of doing. And you're not binary. It is a box for a reason. Why does the box work? This podcast is the growth department. Why does this cause growth? Now that you know that independence can be just unlimited, but it is necessarily constrained, the entire impact of the square is that the size of the square and the component parts determines the degree of constrained independence or the degree of ability for an employee to action their own ideas. And that variance across the 4 sides and the 10 elements on each side, the 40 elements, determines the culture, determines the degree of independence that employees have in the company. And they can bounce around in a box that should have variant size. Some people love a highly constrained environment. They don't really want to make a lot of independent decisions. They just kind of want to be told what to do. They're execution oriented. Other people are, hey, I'm making the decision. I want to affect the outcome. And they need a wide box. You can't put each person in a different box. It'll never work. Okay. And that sounds simplistic, but trust, that's what happens, right? You take someone who really wants a wide degree of independence, you throw them in this tight little environment. It's not going to work. You need to get the individual and the employee in the same size box. Now, how do you do that? That's the hard part, because listeners are going to say, Matt, that sounds great if you have one person, but I've got 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 employees. How do I do that? It doesn't happen overnight for an established business. It can evolve over time if you're a founder. And if you're an employee, you should read this so you can figure yourself out, because you probably should do better at making sure when you say yes to a job that you kind of know what you're signing up for.
Yeah, there are probably red flags or green flags along the interview path. Even in the job description before you apply, there's probably stuff in there that would tell you, oh, I'm going to have to make a lot of decisions and I don't want to, or this is probably not a fit for me.
Right. But if you fit in the box and everyone fits in the box, how does that create growth? The box is this degree of independence. So Chelsey's in the box. She can make micro decisions, which means you don't have to ask everyone, hey, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? You can just go, because you know what decisions you can make and what decisions are outside the box, decisions you can't make. When you make micro decisions, you feel empowered because you're affecting the outcome of the business. You have, even if it's a small piece of influence, you are able to affect an outcome that helps this company succeed. And that makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you have a role. If you know everyone else is inside the box, then you're going to trust them to make decisions. That trust creates a happier, more loyal employee. That more loyal employee is moving faster, making independent decisions, innovating in the space without fear of being branded as an outlier, because you know what you can and can't. You're trusting your other employees to innovate and action on their own accord. You've got a little happy pod of people who are all moving at a higher speed, and that's a company that's going to grow.
If you bring somebody into the box from outside, so if you've got a box that's humming along, I feel like you would find right away if this person isn't a fit in there.
100%. Especially if you know what makes up the 4 sides. You would definitely know. And so understanding your own personal degree of constrained independence and a company's degree. Imagine if this ever takes off and grows legs, if you go on Glassdoor and next to it is a square score that tells you exactly what the score is of the company, and you know your score, and you kind of know, hey, within a standard deviation, I'll be okay. But you wouldn't want to then look at a company for a job where you're like, whoa, that's a highly constrained environment. I don't think I should apply to that job. It'd make things a lot easier for both parties if we were able to do that.
It would. What is the data from all your research and all of your projects you've done show about what vague autonomy? So there is no box. Everybody's rolling around. How vague autonomy can hurt team performance?
Well, what happens when you don't have an intentionally designed square is that square is going to get set, right? Because people need to know. They'll figure it out. The problem is when you allow the employees to make the square, then you're going to get different squares, and it's going to vary in the company. You get fiefdoms.
Like different departments or even down to the individual?
Depending on the company, yeah. Listen, there are definitely places where you have misalignment in the organization at varying levels because the front line decides they don't want to live in that box. And no one has checked it because they don't have a feedback loop in place. And so someone at the top level will say, our new policy is X. And the middle layer will go, I don't know if I really think that's a good idea. And they don't do it. So you have to have, there's a degree of constitution around staying tight on what you said you would do and making sure you actually have this set up so that you don't allow for that. So when you allow individuals to create their own box, you have chaos. Another way, it can be departmental. I worked at a company once where they definitely had different boxes by department.
Mm-hmm.
And go back to your COVID conversation, the entire finance team had to go into the office 5 days a week. Everyone else was 1 to 2 days. You imagine how upset everyone in the finance department was.
They weren't happy.
Nope.
There was like one person who really wanted to get out of the house. And that person was pumped about going to the office every day. But everybody else was pretty upset.
Exactly. And so you've created a different environment. Some people have to go every day and some people don't. And that one, by the way, that one component of where you report and how often you have to go in the office is part of intercommunication. That's the nature of how the staff communicates. And so having a defined position on going to work or not going to work shouldn't just be, effectively what happened, which is Jamie Dimon said you should all return to work. And look what happened. Everyone went, oh, Jamie Dimon said we should go back to the office. And everyone in finance followed. They just copied it. And I love Jamie Dimon. He's I listen to a lot of what he has to say. But just because he thinks that Chase should go back to the office doesn't mean that everyone else in banking and finance should.
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a big bank town. And the return to office is really harsh to people's mellows here, especially if they had moved away or they had hired people in other cities that were awesome, great talent because they were hired for a remote job. And then this like, oh, no, we all need to go back in. It's like, oh, oof.
Yeah. So that's to go back to it. I mean, at the end of the day, it causes, you can see the problem it causes. You've changed your policy. So that's the other thing that happens. You talk about culture is now you've changed your culture, right? And no one can expect then when you make that change, you've changed the square. And now you're knowingly going to have people fall out. Now, the interesting thing about this is the square is not, so rigid that it can't evolve over time. It should, right? Because dynamics change. But if you are going to change the square as an executive, you would have to expect that some people are going to fall off. And you can't look at those people, the people who are hybrid, and look at them negatively. You change the square, not them. And so, I don't know if I would be upset or I would, if you're going to terminate those people, there better be some level of reward or recognition there that, hey, this was, we made a change in policy. That change of policy didn't work for that employee. That is not the employee's fault.
There are a lot of changes happening that are not being rewarded right now with some pretty big companies that are just, they're just like, oh, well, we're going to lose 15% of these people and that's fine. We wanted to anyways. It's like, you don't know which ones are going to leave. You might be losing some great people. Awesome. So we've talked a little bit about the need for the box and why the current culture, copy paste culture is broken. Well, let's introduce constrained independence a little bit more. So what is the performance framework?
Yeah, I mean, it is, to remind everyone, it is the constrained independence is the known communicated degree to which an employee can action their own ideas. And that degree affects their ability to move in the company and to make decisions and to action ideas. And again, some people like that. They like heavy constraint and some people don't. And so why is it a performance metric? It's a performance metric because when you put a light constraint person in a light constraint environment, they're going to run. And if you put a heavy constraint person in a heavy constraint scenario, they're going to work fine. It's when you get the mismatch, you have problems. And so that alignment, that's why the book's called The Culture of Alignment. The alignment is the key unlock for the company. For all the reasons I mentioned, the innovation without fear, the ability for a person to feel like they're empowered to make decisions, for them to not have to ask for certain things. They know when they do and don't have to ask. The trust factor, all those things create a faster moving employee and a happier and more loyal employee. And that's what's going to drive growth. And so you've got to get that correct. How do you get that alignment? Is you take the system, and because it is a quantifying metric, and you do two things. For new hires, you run through it. I mean, I have had to take multiple quizzes to get jobs before, all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's not outside the realm that HR would be the kind of key cog in this wheel, is to make sure that they truly understand what culture is, how it works, and what is going to happen with the person who comes in. Because all too often, hiring managers, and I've been on major hiring teams, and we all kind of look at each other and like, yeah, I think it'll work out. I think it'll fit. But we don't really know. It's kind of, you get a couple hours with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
How do you really know that that person's ways of doing is going to match yours? Because often what happens is that person just said whatever they wanted to say to get the job. And they get in there and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize that Tim over there was such a fireball, and it's like, you kind of miss the vote. So you got to have the methodology to help understand where they're going to run afoul. You can also use it as a diagnostic and have people take the methodology. It's 40 points of survey, and understand the variances at different levels. Have your frontline do it, your middle, your executive team, and then compare. And each side's scored differently. And you'll quickly see exactly where the policies are off in the business. And then you can go remedy it that way.
How do you use a quiz to find who's going to be a great fit without discriminatory bias?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Whole point on this is, and I say this in the book, is that this is designed to be process and systems oriented and not to be used for any level of profiling whatsoever. That's not the goal. Because the underlying theme for the methodology is that it's not who is in there. It's almost independent of the who. It's about how you respond to certain stimuli. So are you mission driven? Do you need to work for a nonprofit or a B corporation? That factors. Like, are you someone who needs to be a brand champion? You're walking around with a hat, you got the water bottle, you got a t-shirt, they all have logo on it. Some people are like, I don't even want to be associated with the company. I'm just going to sit down in a blank office. Those are the things that kind of start to comprise what the methodology does for you in terms of quantifying things. It's less about that than making sure it's DEI compliant. It's a tough one though, because it shouldn't be used in that way.
How do you have different people from different backgrounds? How do you find all these people who would fit into, like, we had leaders say, oh, we just need an order taker for that job. We just need someone who wants to be told what to do for that role.
Yeah.
Is it okay to have specific roles that are task taking, but the person or the individual is actually someone who likes the level of constraint that you have as an org?
That's a great question. The original thesis on this was that the box is for the company, that it is applicable at a departmental level. But if it is going to go down into the individual function role, it still always has to tie back. So you have to have the association across the org and down in full. You have to tie back in some way. You can't have major variances. That said, there are some functions and there are some industries where you really can't have a varying degree of constrained independence because it won't allow for it. You have to do things a certain way. The finance department, unfortunately, it has generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, they have to follow. They can't just whim, a P&L. They have to close the books on a certain day. Those are rigidities to a degree that are function specific, that are less about culture and more about just the way you have to get that job done. The difference in this is it almost isn't as applicable to the function, to that role as a result. It's more about the environment that you're in to a degree. Let's get into the four sides that make up constrained independence. First is identity. That is effectively who you are as a business. This is your mission, your values, your product to mission fit. The question there is, do our staff, do our clients understand who we are and why it's important? The second one is instruction. This is how you define the ways of doing through onboarding, rigidity of guidelines, knowledge transfer, quality protocols. The key question here is, do our staff really truly understand the fashion by which things occur or not? And that's important because not everyone does, and that's where you have problems. The third side is intercommunication. Intercommunication is where most people think culture is. It's not the ping pong table. It's not the happy hour beers, but it is the fashion by which information flows through the company. And how information flows through the company isn't just the email chain. It can be, but it's to our discussion on where you report. It's who you report to. It's how often you report. Do you go to an office? Are you remote? It's tone. Some companies are very formal. Some are informal. It's how you message people. All those things come together. Do you socialize out of work? Do we have a lot of in-work functions? There's all these things that make up communication. The key question there is, as I said, is information flowing in the business in a way that allows for uniformity of message, which again is usually not the case. And the last piece is the information feedback loop. And that's what ties the box together. And the information feedback loop is the method by which you're using information to evolve. The key question is, do we understand the output of our actions? And are we using it to advance either individuals or the company fast enough? This is how not you just review employees, it's how the company reviews itself. And the big miss here at times is that companies do a great job of assessing their employees. They don't do a good job of assessing themselves. And so those 10 elements really combine to allow you to understand historical performance. Are you adhering to what you said you would do? And then you use that information to advance the individual or the company. All those things, all those sides have 10 elements that help you, and you can do a high level, medium, or low degree of constraint. And those things help you really truly understand the degree to which the element should be implemented. And for those who've never run a company before, some people don't want a mission statement. Some people love one. Some people have it stamped on everything. Some people, their logo is their mission. Some people's logo is just a name. Like all those things tie together to help you get to where you need to be. All those things link in a way, and they can have varying degrees of independence along the way.
So we've all felt it when well, I won't say all, I'm not going to, but most of us have felt it when we're in a team that's off, whether you're the leader or you're a part of the team. How do you turn that into something that you can fix if you're in an established team? How do you start putting those 4 sides in place? I know we're going to dive deeper into this another day, but
We are.
give us something to chew on.
High level, you have to have people take the test, and there's no right answer. And then you kind of figure out where each element is off, because the answer of each question has to be a high level or low degree of constraint. And there's descriptions. You can go on my website, townsquare-advisors.com, and actually take the test. You can take a free test too, which is only 10 questions, and learn a little bit more about yourself and what degree of constraint you might be better fit in. People like doing it because they learn a little bit about who they are or the company that they work for. And they're like, I never really thought of it that way, which is nice to see. But you have to score it. And only then can you really understand where you're off on the policies and procedures you put in place. What happens most often is people haven't intentionally done this. Things have just defaulted into the ways of doing, and there's drift over time. So going back to like what happens with bad cultures, the most common one I see at times is this product to mission drift, where you end up in a circumstance where the company's brand and mission has said one thing. It never evolved. No one really looked at it. They just stamped it, to your point. They stamped it out there and said, hey, look, we've got a mission and values on our webpage. And then they go off and they launch a new product, or they acquire a business. And everyone's like, what are you guys doing? What happened there?
Yeah.
This isn't even, are you even good at doing this? And then staff kind of start questioning things about where the company's going strategically, and clients go, wait a second, do you even care about me as your customer anymore? It's clear you're over here now. They didn't message it the right way. They didn't set themselves up for scale. And so they created a rigid brand that prevented them from evolving. Look at the top one that's top of choice right now is Golden Corral.
Oh, the Cracker Barrel?
Oh, sorry. There you go. Cracker Barrel.
Oh, if you're not a LinkedIn person, I'm sure it was on other things, but LinkedIn for the past 2 weeks has just been all Cracker Barrel, all filled with people's opinions on this rebrand.
I know. And they can't get away from it. They can't evolve as a company, right? They're stuck. And it's because they never really did anything with their logo. Or they could have evolved it if they had understood the value prop and what really mattered in their logo, which of course was I forget the name of the gentleman who was on the Cracker Barrel, but apparently everyone loved that one guy more than anything else. And so there was a misunderstanding there of product to mission, right? Their mission was, really heavily tied to the legacy mindset and the nostalgia, and they may not have really understood that to the degree that they should have.
So we've touched on what the system is, a little bit about what's wrong with things today. Why does a leader need to take this seriously looking forward? Why do they need to put a framework in place?
Well, the very simple answer is that a framework is better than no framework. And that sounds pedestrian and obvious, but I think my almost 25 years of experience will tell you it's definitely not what happens. And I think people think they have a system in place, or they think that they have a good culture, and they really don't properly understand what's going on at the front line or the variants that are occurring. And that's where problems occur. And so you see stagnation, or if they are starting to scale and they're starting to push, then all of a sudden things fall apart. It's because they haven't put the systems and processes in place. And it sounds a little bit cold, because I think what everyone wants to hear with culture is the warm fuzzies,
Yeah.
right?
Just feels good to work here.
Exactly. No one wants to quantify culture. No one wants to sit there and say, yeah, we have our culture is the output of processes and systems, and we've quantified it in a metric. That doesn't sound fun. It doesn't sound like culture. Culture is and I've gotten into conversations with the HR departments around this, where the leaders say, no, the culture is like the office happy hour and the picnics that we do out front. And I'm like, no, it's one component. It's intercommunication. And they all disagree. And that's why I think this is so important, and why leaders need to have this system, is because, going back to the statistics, that isn't what is actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't really matter how many company picnics you have or how much swag you distribute. It's an amalgamate of all of these things that coalesce to the experience the employee has and the alignment with them, right? And if I'm a go-getter and I'm out there pushing hard, I am not going to work in a business that's really just kind of like, hey, we're just here to sit here and kind of just walk through the motions, right? That doesn't work. So you got to have that alignment. And alignment has to be identified, and it has to be structured, and it has to be organized, but it's not binary. It is a box for a reason. You are bouncing around that box. The difference is how big or small that box is. And so I think that's why why leaders need this system, is they've got to shift away from this warm, fuzzy view of what culture is, and the check the box stuff we started this conversation around, and realize that, unfortunately, what real culture is, what real high trust, high performing teams are aligned businesses that are intentionally designed. And that takes a little bit more work, and it takes a little bit more effort to understand, and it's not sexy, but it's in my view, after all these years, it is the way a high trust, high performing company will work.
So we shouldn't just go into ChatGPT, say, what do I need to do to make a good culture?
Yeah, exactly.
Define it a little better.
Yeah, what are the top 5 promotional items I should hand all new hires? Everyone gets a bag and a cup, right? You get a bag and you get a mug, and a koozie.
That'll make them perform better.
Exactly, and they're going to be happier, and they'll stay 20 years because they got a T-shirt.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't taken the quiz on the site yet. I wanted to meet with you first, understand what steps I should take next. So I'm going to go to the website. We're going to link it below. I'll take the 10-question test first to see a little insight on myself, and then I'll take one on the whole org. Yeah. And so what's next? What should we dive into next to really get into this constrained independence?
Well, I think the next step is taking those 4 sides and digging into them. And maybe as a little bit of a lead, what did AI say the right box is? There's an answer there. Even though I will say that there is no right box, only the one that worked for you and your company, AI had a strong opinion about what the elements should be and how they would work. And I think diving into the elements, why they matter, where do I see most of the sides, what elements cause the most variability or are causing the most strife? Let's dig in there, because I think that's what, again, people need to realize. The culture is not a T-shirt. Culture is an amalgamate of processes and systems and approaches. So we got to dive into really, okay, so what does that mean? What are those systems? What are the 10 elements on identity? What are the 10 elements in instruction? How do they all work together? What does the variability look like? What does a high, medium, low application of product to mission fit mean? And why should I care about that? But AI has an answer, and everyone loves AI these days, but I made ChatGPT take the quiz, and they definitely gave me an answer.
Okay, well, I'll take one myself, and then I'll find out what my ChatGPT says.
Well, awesome. I appreciate the time to walk through it.
Great. I'm looking forward to the future sessions, too, to dive in even deeper.
Sounds good.
Talk to you soon.